Hello and welcome to Grey Matter Talks Tech, a podcast for dev and IT enthusiasts who want to hear insights, tips and stories from nerds like us. This week, we'll be talking all things mapping and AI NVIDIA. So I'm your host, Sam Avery. I'm a mapping licensing specialist here at Grey Matter, and I'm delighted to be joined by my fellow mapping expert, Clemens Schotte from Microsoft. Hi, Clemens.
Hi Sam. Yeah, so I introduced myself. So my name is Clemens Schotte. I'm based in the Netherlands, by the way, working for Microsoft as program manager in the Azure Maps team. Basically, the team that is creating the whole mapping experience for all enterprises for Microsoft software, of course. We also part of the Bing Maps for Enterprise team, and basically that are the two mapping products that we have at Microsoft.
So today we'll be discussing what's happening in the logistics space and how companies like NVIDIA and Microsoft are innovating route optimization. I'm sure you will have seen in the news, but NVIDIA have been getting a lot of buzz lately because of their record-breaking 23 world records in the past 3 years for solving complex routing problems. I thought it'd be great for us to sit down and give our thoughts on how this will shape the future for those in logistics and supply chain. So I guess from my perspective, Clemens, I think it would be good to start with what sort of trends and challenges you're seeing in particularly the logistics and supply chain industry and how they have such an impact on e-commerce and sustainability, etc.
Yeah, so actually, what I see when I talk with customers and also with industry partners, then what you see is actually that you want to have more real time information. So, as an end user customer, you are waiting for a package that needs to arrive at your home. What you see maybe still today is that you get an email a day before that the postal service will arrive within a window of like 4 hours or maybe 2 hours is if you're lucky. But then when the day is when you're waiting for your package, they are delayed or not showing up on the time that you are basically sitting at home waiting for your package. So what I see actually is that real-time information and optimization of routing and also basically letting the end user know when the package will arrive is key today. So if you have routing services that can help you optimize that for your end customer, that will be a really great benefit or advantage, I will say. But of course, it's not only that; it's also cost savings, especially when you have EV routing. When you have electric trucks, if you're looking, for example, in London, a city center, you cannot drive in certain times. And of course, when you have an electric truck, there are some conditions where you maybe the route makes things really difficult. So those trends I see when I talk with customers.
So Clemens, when it comes to really doing large scale complex routing problems, how do you find from a technical perspective some of the problems that people encounter and sort of how NVIDIA and Microsoft are trying to disrupt this space in trying to fix that as a real problem for quite a lot of ISVs and customers?
Yeah, that have all to do actually with the amount of data what you have. So, for example, when you a delivery company and have multiple trucks with multiple destinations, and of course the trucks have maybe different uh, amount of capacity what you can have for your packaging. Then they have the drivers with different working hours. You have maybe also different opening hours for the delivery points. Maybe you have some let's say break time for the chauffeur. So there are many other things that makes the whole thing really complex. And then the second thing is that you want to have more like semi real time route optimization, specifically when you want to communicate that back to your end customers that are receiving the package, if that is a consumer or maybe a business where you're going to deliver to. So what we see from the combination of what Microsoft with Azure Maps and what NVIDIA can do with their co-ops AI actually is that we are combining those two technologies so that we, as Microsoft, have all the routing information, all the traffic information, all the cost of the routing actually. And what NVIDIA is really good in, a really powerful service what they have with their QOps AI is that they can resolve basically the biggest question is what is the best order of delivering those packaging. And of course, the last step in that whole process is still maybe showing the route to the person that needs to see how the route will be. And of course, Azure Maps can also do that. So I will say the combination of what NVIDIA can do with their route, not route solving, but basically the solving of the order of what you need to deliver. And what Azure Maps can do is actually the cost matrix of the delivery, and that combination will create actually a really high quality, but also really fast way of how you want to handle those routes.
So in your experience then, because obviously NVIDIA is tailored more towards the enterprise standard, I think when you're looking at their real-time route optimization and you can handle up to 15,000 routing tasks all simultaneously.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think that Azure Maps is I mean, we all know that from a smaller perspective, because obviously not everyone is at that enterprise level, Azure Maps caters for that need really well, but also has that scalability to go into much larger problems.
So when you're looking actually to what Azure Maps can do is actually the cost matrix API, and that can scale up to 10,000 kind of cost matrix. But then that is not, I will say, the biggest problem, but that's basically in the second step when you do the route optimization itself. And that is why NVIDIA is basically the place to go to, because their GPU based solution will basically enable that route solving question really quickly. And I will say the combination of those two are really interesting for real big enterprise customers. But of course, when you are a small business and maybe you don't need the NVIDIA solution, there are also open source libraries that can do the solving for you. Of course, they are not that quick and have not that many different parameters what you can provide them, but it can also be a good solution when you are a small business, for example. So you can still use Azure Maps for all the route matrix information, what is needed actually for solving the problem. But I will say for the more advanced and for the more real-time type of scenarios, the NVIDIA option is the best thing to go for. But if you have less budget or a really small shop, then probably an open source solver can also do the same thing. But then, with some limitations, of course.
Of course, and I think that really comes down to the experience of the developer, right? Azure and Microsoft do a very good job of making things really straightforward. And I think when you're utilizing the matrix routing and then obviously some of the code that was provided to customers to optimize it, I think that fits a really good space within the sector.
Yeah, and also to address that, because what we have learned actually, so I told you in the beginning that we have also Bing Maps for Enterprise. That will be a services that we are going to deprecate, because we have also Azure Maps, and that has no use to have two enterprise mapping products. So basically, most of the capabilities and more are actually part of Azure Maps. But one of the things what we had and what we don't have in Azure Maps is basically our Mio API, so from Bing Maps. And in Mio, we actually has kind of a SaaS solution for that whole routing problem, solving problem actually. But then the downside of that was it was easy to use, but it was also limited because it was only optimizing for certain parameters what we provide by the API. And when I talked with customers many times, they have so many requirements and want to basically optimize the route in different ways, what is better for their business. And that's why we don't have a SaaS solution for that anymore within, let's say, in Azure Maps. But we still have those APIs. So let's say the cost and route matrix APIs in combination with any route solver, open source or the NVIDIA solution, will basically bring you the same capabilities, or as it will say, even more capabilities, and you have more control about what you want to optimize.
And obviously, we've talked very heavily on the logistics side of things. I think when it comes to this space, I think a lot of people sort of neglect the larger supply chain and more last mile delivery systems. How do you find the use cases are changing on this? Because it seems that typically we all focused on, for example, lorries, but it's a lot more than that now. When you've got, for example, someone like Amazon or another delivery service where they might not necessarily need the full truck parameters, but it's more around how do they optimize their route even with stock? Do you find that this sort of NVIDIA's product is sort of the next step to that? Because obviously we can optimize the routes themselves, but do you think that this sort of sector will be pushing more towards a much larger optimization standpoint?
Yeah, so I will say the optimizer of the route solver actually does not know anything about location or the route itself. It only knows kind of vector data, and I don't mean vector data what you can plot on a map. So that's just kind of IDs from, let's say, that you have a vector from 1 by 1 to 1 by 2, for example. And the root solver from NVIDIA can actually solve that really quickly. And there's no knowledge or there's no understanding actually about a real world scenario or geospatial. So you can even use their solver within a warehouse where you want to solve the route for robots within a warehouse. So all the parameters what you're going to feed to the solver are coming from data what you already have yourself. Let's say you have your different trucks, maybe you have some EV trucks, different types of trucks. You have all the parameters from the drivers, let's say working hours, the rest time, the breaks, but also the delivery windows for the endpoints, maybe the starting point, endpoint of the information, and then you need also input from the route itself, and that's why Azure Maps is uh, one of the biggest inputs for the solver. Is basically that you need the time that a specific route will take, but also what the cost will be for a specific route, and all those parameters together basically can solve basically what is the best solution for maybe the quickest or the cheapest, or maybe it will give you also an indication for traffic information, for example. All those information is basically feed into the solver of NVIDIA, and then it will be calculating, and it can calculate that in a couple of seconds, let's say less than 10 seconds, or it can take up to an hour to calculate all that information. But you can specify how quickly you want to get the answer back from the solver. So if you want to have a semi real-time solution, you say, give me a result back in, let's say, in less than 10 seconds. And then you have for your whole fleet with all the packaging, actually calculate what is the best route for that within those 10 seconds. And that is really quick, so you don't need to do that anymore a day before, and then when things will change, the end user will still waiting for the packaging, or you are too late or too early, etc. So, and another point maybe to mention is that the type of travel is important. So I was talking about truck routing, for example, what is mainly used for this scenario. But it can also be that you have smaller car types of cars. They have different route, different restrictions, or maybe less restrictions. Maybe you want to do routing by walking, for example. That is also an option. And of course, you can say, I want to have historical uh, conditions of traffic information. So that is interesting when you do the route solving a day before. But then when it is semi real time, you can also use real time traffic information included within your route. So you can optimize during the delivery actually if there still is the right order to deliver the packages. So you can save time and costs in the end, and maybe fuel or electricity depending on the vehicle to how to deliver that.
Just from my perspective, I think it's quite interesting to see mapping as a whole because it hits every single sector, right? From everything from logistics to retail, manufacturing, energy, e-commerce, everything has an element of geospatial data nowadays. And when it comes to a couple of the, I guess, use cases, is there any others that you find that would really benefit from this type of optimization? Because obviously we've spoken about last mile delivery optimization, we're talking about field dispatch efficiency. It's always interesting to see that with some of the use cases, I think most people think, how can I get a job done faster? Not necessarily actually, how can I optimize to get even more in? Is there any other use cases that you find that could really benefit from this type of technology?
Yes, of course. I give you an example actually, and it has not per se to do with the logistics of delivering goods, but it's basically, let's say you are a retailer and you have multiple shops around the country, and you have, of course, customers, and you want to target those customers and send them a promotion so they get maybe a free ice cream or whatever. But you only want to target those customers that are living in 10 minutes walking from those stores. So basically, it has more to do with analytics, but you still need those time and distance information from every store. You want to know that also from all your customers. So if you have the address or maybe only the zip code from a customer, you can actually calculate how far away walking in time they are from every store. And then you say, I target only those customers 10 minutes walking from a specific store, and I am only going to send a promotion so they basically get that free ice cream at the store. So that's basically our multiple things what are involved with mapping. So you need to do something with geocoding, so transforming an address to a location, and then you have the longitude, the latitude information. You need an route range API or an isochrone, that basically gives you um, a polygon of distance in time. So the 10 minutes walking around a store, and that is not a circle, but that can be a really different shape depending on the construction of the city or the roads around that store. And then you want to do some analytics on top of that to yeah, send or target those customers that are within those isochrones, so that you basically send them the promotion. So all those things together, yeah, is really interesting for some customers. But then you can also go to the next step: is if you are, for example, want to deliver goods from those stores, then you maybe can only say, uh, for example, ice creams, they are melting, so you cannot go further away than 10 minutes because then your ice cream is melted when you're at home. Maybe if you want to do delivery, you also want to use the route range isochrone APIs to find out what are the areas where you can deliver certain goods and then use that also in your optimization in the end.
Thank you for that, Clemens. I think one thing that I find particularly interesting, and I know this is approaching a subject that I'm sure will probably be covered in a later podcast, but it's always interesting to see all of these applications, someone like NVIDIA and customers utilizing them within, let's say, Azure. I think a lot of customers don't necessarily realize just quite how robust Microsoft Azure's security credentials are. And I mean, they offer that through comprehensive protection from advanced threat protection, identity management, compliance solutions, and obviously from a cloud operations standpoint, they're adhering to industry standards and best practices. Do you find any customers really concerned about the security when they're talking about their logistics solutions?
Yeah, definitely. And that has more to do, I will say, not with security as first approach, but more about where is my data stored, who is processing that data. For example, when we are in Europe, maybe you don't want to send data to the US. Uh, there are all kinds of concerns who have access and where data is basically stored and processed. And of course, you can solve that with security things within Azure. Because Azure Maps is part of Azure, we already compliant with all those security and compliance regulations what Azure also is doing. So that also applies to Azure Maps. But on top of that, it's also good to know that you basically can choose in which geospatial area data will be processed. For example, let's say you're here in Europe, you say my Azure Maps instance endpoint needs to be in Europe, and then you can still use that worldwide, but data is basically processed within the European Union or in the European boundaries of that area. That also applies actually not only to the Azure services, but also to Azure Maps visual in Power BI and in Microsoft Fabric. So even there, we are compliant with GDPR, etc. So security is one part, but that is basically solving the bigger concerns is can we compliant with uh, European or maybe other countries where some regulations about privacy is involved.
Thanks for answering that. I mean, it's a bit of a loaded question because obviously security is such a large topic and it always will be. And I know that a lot of customers have concerns when it comes to AI, and obviously security generally comes side by side. But moving on to the sort of future of mapping and logistics, do you see any, or at least can speculate any future trends that you think might evolve as time goes on?
Yeah, definitely. So, what we've seen in the past is actually that mapping, geospatial, maybe analytics are always done by geospatial professionals. Um, but looking to the future is that, let's say, the majority of customers, maybe the developers or data scientists, are not dedicated geospatial professionals or even farther away from that. So when you're looking to the future, I will actually see that more and more businesses and persons within the business actually want to do something with location data, maybe with routing, with geospatial analytics. Uh, but then the tooling is way too complex today. So we are trying to solve that actually, so that you can use geospatial capabilities without needing any geospatial background. So, for example, you have different data sources within your company from external or internal sources. Um, Sometimes you need to transform that data before it can be used. Then you want to maybe create kind of application, what you want to share with internal or external stakeholders. And that application is, of course, a mapping application or maybe some geospatial analytics on top of that. For example, that example I was talking about, the ice creams and the promotion what you're going to send to your customers. That type of scenarios you probably want to create without needing a developer, without needing a geospatial background. Maybe just type in the question in Copilot and say, give me all the customers around my stores, 10 minutes walking, and show that on a map. And that is basically what the feature will bring. If you can basically explain what you want to see, I expect that are features that are coming out, not only from Microsoft, actually from other uh, providers that are also doing mapping. But of course, I'm speaking for Microsoft. I will see that also happening within Copilot in Microsoft Fabric, that you basically can use AI to talk and ask questions about your data, what you have, without needing a geospatial background.
Thanks, there, Clemens. I mean, it's a really interesting topic. I think from my perspective, I see the trends Microsoft side too, is that a lot of logistics and optimization, generally speaking, is purely based on numbers, right? It's customers trying to maximize profits, maximize service for their customers. I found a real uptake and trend that sort of I think will be at the forefront pretty soon. And that's more around the sustainability and the sort of impact on the environment, but also more around the disaster management and sort of risk mitigation for the insurance industry with, things like global warming, etc. Do you do you see that from the Microsoft side as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. So actually twofold. So what we actually has done is we have some EV routing capabilities in our APIs. For example, when you want to know how far can you drive with an electric truck or electric vehicle, uh, then that type of information is available. But maybe you have also some other uh, I've, you're an insurance company and you have like a fleet map and you want to do some analytics on top of that. You need to have some geospatial data, and on top of that, you want to do some calculations. So that are also things that are involved in that sense, and bringing basically the capabilities of Azure Maps, Microsoft Fabric, and maybe customer data all together. You can basically make those impacts better visible to stakeholders within the company. Let's say that you can say, this year we have driven so many miles or kilometers on electric, and that will save us so many CO2 pollution, etc. So yeah, I will see that it will
And
happen more and more.
from on that, it would be interesting to hear any real life use cases if you have any. Um, because I think from my side, I went to a really interesting talk, I think it's last year, and it was actually Barcelona. So the city of Barcelona, they were measuring the impact that all the vehicles had in the city. So what they started to do was understand logistics and how everyone was driving in terms of traffic flow, understanding peak times, etc. And they were making huge changes to the city to impact, or at least negate the impact of the vehicles. And they ended up creating really large green spaces where they created a tunnel through the city, and the walls were all lined with plants, which were really easy from an IoT perspective to monitor and look after. And they were really understanding of the fact that you can't necessarily always improve the logistics side of things, but you can also improve the green impact that it has. Is there any use cases, even on the EV side of things, that you find quite interesting for any real life customers?
No, not specific to, specifically on the EV routing, but more about big events. So I have seen several projects in the past around the world that are basically using kind of crowd control, monitoring where people are moving within those big events. So sometimes there are really big events that are city level big, where they need to know where are people coming from, where maybe traffic is happening. Maybe it's also about security. So there is some monitoring involved to know if there are some accidents or maybe some other concerns within the city happening. So you want to actually have some crowd control system, and they basically used Azure Maps not only for the visualization layer, but also for getting some information, let's say the real-time traffic information. But it always starts also with collecting your own data. So it's not only the traffic data that is important, but it's bringing all the different data layers together and getting insights. So that is not an end solution what we built as Microsoft, but basically there are ISVs or partners building this type of solutions where you can basically control and get all the insights what are happening in those big sporting events or other type of events that a lot of crowds will attend actually. You can think about sport events around the world where those solutions are built using Azure Maps and in combination with other Microsoft technology to create those solutions.
That was thank you for that, Clemens. I think from my side that wraps things up quite nicely. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to mention that was particularly pertinent to this topic?
Ooh, that's a good,
It's a loaded
yeah,
question.
that's a good one. We already talked a little bit about the future, and I still believe that AI and Copilot, and specifically geospatial for the non-professional or non-geospatial professional, I need to say that will be a really big impact. So that you can basically ask questions to the system and get insights in situations you don't need any developer to create that for you anymore, but it will give you a map with all the data on top of it, and you basically can make your own decisions uh, on on the results what the system has provided you, and that I think that will be a really cool and also big impact for the future.
Completely agree. Well, in that case, then, thank you so much, Clemens, for joining. I think it wraps things up quite nicely. I know that we touched on some big topics there, from the basics of logistics and supply chain, obviously touched on NVIDIA and their AI sort of game changer in the space, and obviously Azure Maps and their optimization that can be handled. I think from my side, it'd be really interesting to hear what the listeners and their end customers, etc., have got and their experiences with logistics, because it's always interesting to hear real life examples, as we deal with quite a lot of customers in that space. Obviously, from a mapping standpoint, feel free to reach out, any of our listeners, to talk to Grey Matter and our team. It's not just myself, as you can imagine. There's a large team in the mapping side at Grey Matter that can help with pretty much anything and everything. But a massive thank you, Clemens, for joining. I think the next episode will be on Cloud Marketplace with Chris Chandler, which will be a really interesting one for anyone to listen into. And obviously, any listeners, feel free to subscribe and make sure you don't miss the next one.
Now, thank you, Sam, for this podcast. It was really fun to talk with you.